Let's start by getting two things clear. I'm a transgender man and a lifelong Catholic. This is something that, a lot of people have different ideas and feelings about in both camps, honestly. A lot of LGBTQ people are like, why are you still Catholic? A lot of Catholic people are like, uh, you cannot be transgender. That's not allowed. And so it's a very interesting dynamic where I have to deal with a lot of input and pushback from people just for the person that I am. I didn't choose to be born into a Catholic family. I didn't choose to have years of Catholic study and weekly mass and receiving all the sacraments. This was something that was a part of my life and is something that shaped me into the person that I am today, just as much as I didn't choose to be transgender. I didn't choose to always have this draw to the masculine. I didn't choose to look at my dad and think, I feel like I'm supposed to be following in your footsteps, not in the footsteps of my mom. And it's a very interesting thing because so many people have such a difficulty with aligning the two things. But it's important to me to talk about it and share about it today because I do exist. And I know that there are so many others like me, so many young people who grow up in a Catholic environment just like I did and who don't have the opportunity or don't see a path or a way for them to have the opportunity to be themselves. So today I wanted to just go through kind of a basic overview of my life's story, my experiences as a transgender person, and kind of how we got to today. So to start with, let's talk about childhood faith formation. So this is also something that some of the diehards will try to dig into, questioning whether it was orthodox enough. And the answer is yes, it was very orthodox. It was a very strict and very fundamentalist type of Catholic world that I lived in. I do think that there were definite pockets of freedom, I'll say, where it was okay to be genuinely myself. But so many times I got the message that I needed to conform to a very particular aesthetic, a very particular performance. People were expecting me, being born female, to be like the perfect girl, the perfect woman. There's a lot of stories that my parents used to tell me about how they would bring out a dress for Sunday Mass, and I just wasn't having it. There's one example where I literally tore a dress. There are plenty of people who would self-describe as tomboy who are still that way. They may be a cis woman, but they have masculine interests. They might be a lesbian, they might not be. Actually, one of my very earliest memories or examples of gender discordance would be I was in daycare and all the girls were given pink blankets at nap time and all the boys were given blue blankets. And I demanded a blue blanket. And I really like this story because it conveys several things. First, I was too young to have any knowledge or language, and I wasn't taught any, about LGBTQ identity or trans identity. And so I couldn't really just say, hey, I'm trans. But also, it shows that, there's nothing inherently gendered about the color blue or pink in and of itself. So it shows that I was looking at how can I communicate to the adults around me? I know that they're grouping kids by blue blankets and pink blankets. And I was conveying, hey, I'd like to be in the blue blanket side. That's really what I see that story as, which I think is just a really powerful example of I was able to know myself. And then, of course, as I grew and got older, all the performance messaging about having to perform femininity started to really become internalized and made it really difficult for me to think about my identity because all the Catholic doctrines that I was taught operated like barriers or like walls, and I wouldn't let myself go there mentally. And then when I was 15 or 16 or so, I started to discover on YouTube video blogs by transgender men. And what I remember of that time is it wasn't like an immediate, like, that's me. It was more of a, I feel like a fascination here. And when I developed that interest, or like when I watched the videos, what I would discovered was I would kind of like go down the list of all the things they said, and I was actually looking for things that I didn't relate to, because the issue for me was that there were a lot of things that were checking boxes, and there were certain things that I really knew I did resonate with. But I'm really serious when I say, like, I think I was very specifically looking for ways that I didn't relate, because I was desperately trying to not be trans, because I knew I could see from these videos, and I knew from the world that I lived in, that this would blow up the life that I was living in. And I actually did think many times, if I could just snap my fingers, or if I could just flip a switch, that I would do it, because then I would be able to avoid uh, all of the really difficult things, the unpredictable things. Like, that was part of it, is I just didn't know what would happen. I knew something bad would happen. I knew my life would not be the same at all, but I couldn't predict it, and I wouldn't have had any way to know, you know? And there was kind of one more other formative thing that happened during that time, which is that I did share one of those things with my dad. One of the things on this checklist of trans identity bingo, I guess, that resonated. And I told him that I knew I wanted top surgery. And that his reaction was basically that he thought that it was like a sin. And so that one moment, because that was the thing that I was that was the highest on the list. I knew that that was a deep area of discomfort for me, and that that was something that I was really interested in pursuing, to the point where, even though it was going to be controversial, I brought it up to him, and his response of it, not thinking that it was the right thing to do, I really feel like that set me back a lot, because I was just like, well, I'm still a kid. I can't really like do any of this by myself. Like, I would need my family's support. And so that really hit pause for a long time. And then, I finished high school. I went to college. I I spent all of my time focusing on like my professional development and my career, because coming from this more fundamentalist background, there were not a lot of options for like what I could do with my life that appealed to me, because I didn't want to be a wife or a mother. I did not want to be a wife or a mother. And I knew that really strongly. And while it's totally fine for there to be single women, and this is part of the deconstruction phase, where I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to put all my chips in on being a single woman. I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to embrace this idea that a woman can be self-determined, can have whatever traits that she has. And I believe that still, and I believed it then, but it wasn't resonating for me, because I am a transgender man. And I'll say as well that it was really difficult to try to live that way. I felt like I was constantly wrestling and constantly struggling with something that didn't resonate with me authentically at all. But what I was being told was like the only genuine or authentic way forward. There were things like John Paul II's theology of the body. Remember what I said about orthodox? Pretty orthodox. And I read that intensely, and I really tried to understand what he was getting at with this idea that there are these inherent qualities that are within somebody because of the gender that they are. It again doesn't resonate with the reality of the huge diversity of any singular woman or man's experiences. I think it's very disingenuous when anybody says that these very stereotypical standard norms are like under attack, especially now in the current political climate in 2025. It has never been easy to be a member of the LGBTQ community, And yet we have always been here because we are human, and there have always been LGBTQ humans. So those years when I was really focused on my career were really difficult and very emotionally taxing, because it was like every day took so much focused energy to try to be a particular version of a person that I thought I was supposed to be. It takes so much energy to put on a show rather than to be who you authentically are. That is a huge, huge point. And it also is very alienating because, if I dealt with a lot of feeling of emptiness, which did contrast with what everybody was saying. The whole thing in that type of Catholicism is, if you do exactly this, if you follow these exact rules, you're supposed to be overflowing with all the graces and you're supposed to be happy, you're supposed to be joyful. And yes, they do have this idea of the dark night of the soul as well, which is that, okay, there are periods of dryness in the spiritual life. Okay, but like, I was dealing with an existential disconnection from myself, which really goes against everything in theology of the body, which really goes against everything that Jesus was really actually about. Really, for a long time, I was stuck in this place of, I don't even recognize myself. Like, I don't even know who I am. I don't even really know what I like or don't like. I just know that there are these very strict rules that I have to follow. And as long as I do those, then I'm doing the right thing. And so the breaking point wasn't like a single point for sure. It was definitely maybe more like dominoes that slowly start to fall. Even though I guess dominoes are normally quick, but just like a gradual, this thing that was really rigid in my mind started to bend, and then the next thing started to bend, and then so on and so forth. And really, at the heart of it was me spending a lot of time alone. It was a very sad and difficult, lonely and depressing time, but it was the first time in my life that I had gotten close to anything true or real about myself. And I think, this brings up another important point is, again, being trans is not something that we do like as a lark. It's not super easy. It's not sudden or quick. And it involves a lot of deep internal wrestling, analysis. The journey into the heart of yourself is not going to be a painless one, period. And I chose to undertake that journey because I felt that the truth about myself was worth it. And I felt that living the way that I had been, just passing days, I guess just waiting to die so that I could go to heaven. It just wasn't, I knew it wasn't what I was made for. And it wasn't what I had been taught as a child, which is that God has an actual plan for all of us. And we were created fully uniquely. The exact unique way that I am was intended by God. And so coming to being able to see that, including a transgender identity, that was the journey. It was only when I was finally able to let go of focusing all my time and energy on my professional life as a way to earn God's favor by doing work for God, working for Catholic video production companies. It was only when I did that I was able to start to think about who I actually was underneath that. If I'm not working on this image of myself as a professional Catholic, who am I? And that's when I met Max, myself. That's when I met the person that I was underneath all of that stuff. And that's when I started the long and arduous process of really going beyond just saying, okay, a woman can be however she wants to be, but going into, okay, but what are the barriers that we place upon ourselves and in society that prevent or limit us from being who we are? I was taught that Catholicism had an answer for absolutely everything, but that's not really how Catholicism is supposed to work. Catholicism is supposed to be about following Jesus. And when it becomes all of these other things, like it has to be a Latin mass, the priest needs to be facing away for it to be most perfectly holy, it starts to become individual people's like obsession with that form of Catholicism, which isn't the same thing as having a relationship to God or being close to God or even like understanding something true about God. It becomes more about logic games or about a performance or about being able to win a debate against somebody. I'm pretty sure that if like Jubilee videos had existed in the time of Jesus, that he would not have gone on there like Jesus versus 20 atheists. He would not have done that. That's just not his thing. What do we know about Jesus? He was with the marginalized people. He was with the people on the margins. Like basically every story about Jesus is him hanging out with the not cool people, like the people that did not have status, the people who did not have wealth, the people who are not super important in church hierarchy. He was hanging out with like the real ones, okay? Like not the fancy people. So after going through all of this, where did I end up? Like how did I make it through? So I did have to go through a deconstruction, and I talk about it as a deconstruction to reconstruction because at the end of it, like I found an affirming Catholic community that I had no idea existed with these multiple organizations that have been around for actual decades trying to do this work of saying, hey, there's a place for LGBTQ people in the Catholic Church. Our faith actually demands that we allow there to be space for these people instead of holding on to the rigidity of individual teachings that have introduced terminology that is harmful and actively harming real people. These types of affirming groups are constantly wanting to build bridges and show that, again, LGBTQ people, Catholic people can just be LGBTQ Catholic people. It doesn't have to be this crazy dramatic thing. We can just be people of faith too. And this journey is also what led me to meeting Pope Francis in October of 2024, which was, of course, like a crazy once in a lifetime, life changing experience to be able to look into the eyes of the person who is at the top of the Catholic Church and tell him in Spanish, his native language, poorly pronounced, by the way, that I'm transgender, and have him smile, like beam back at me and shake my hand with such warmth. I was in a reception line, so it was a brief encounter, but to have that experience, it solidified my belief that as a transgender Catholic person, I do belong in the church. And that's not really something anybody can take away from me, especially not random commenters on YouTube. So that's just a little slice of an overview of my journey. I write a lot about this. I wrote about meeting the Pope multiple times for the National Catholic Reporter under my name, Maxwell Kuzma. I also have a Substack that I work on with my good friend Emma. We've done a Catholic masculinity series. We've done a queer Catholic joy series. We write about various issues in the church from this liberatory queer liberation theology perspective. There's a place for everybody, and everybody deserves to have a seat at the table. These are the things that I believe, and it may not be for everybody, but if it does resonate for you, and it does speak to that younger version of me who was struggling and didn't have an example of this, that's what really counts to me. And I hope you'll join me as I continue exploring these types of questions on this channel.